Two major winter storms are pummeling much of the country this morning, and investors are learning more about how the Federal Reserve plans to fight inflation in the near future. Good morning. I'm Corva Coleman from NPR News, and here are today's top stories. The National Weather Service says two major winter storms are pelting much of the country. There's a weather system in Southern California that will turn into blizzard conditions in mountainous areas by tomorrow. That could affect travel just outside Los Angeles. A second storm is bringing more blizzard conditions to northern states. That includes South Dakota. Dustin Hansen is with the Public Works Department in the city of Sioux Falls, and he says crews have been plowing streets.
So we'll run 24-hour shifts until we get this event cleaned up. Likely be working through Sunday and potentially into next week on these 12-hour shifts.
Farther east, ice and snow have cut power to more than 750,000 customers in Michigan and Illinois alone. That's according to the tracking site poweroutage.us. Minutes from the Federal Reserve's most recent policy meeting offer new insights into how the central bank is approaching inflation. NPR's Scott Horsley tells us the Fed has raised interest rates aggressively as it tries to bring prices under control.
The Fed has raised interest rates 8 times since March, including its most recent rate hike of a 0.25 percentage point earlier this month. The vote for that rate increase was unanimous, but newly released minutes show a few members of the rate-setting committee were willing to go even faster and boost borrowing costs by a 0.5 percentage point instead. The Fed has telegraphed that additional rate hikes are likely. Investors now expect that interest rates will stay higher for longer than they were anticipating just a few weeks ago. Some Fed officials think that as consumers become more price-sensitive, businesses will be forced to cut their profit margins. That could also help to bring down inflation. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
The Canadian Defense Department says it is aware of Chinese efforts to conduct surveillance operations in Canadian airspace and waters. As Dan Karpenchuk tells us, an earlier report said Chinese surveillance buoys had been detected in Arctic waters.
Defense Department spokesman Daniel Leboutillier would not provide further information, saying it's to ensure the integrity of military operations. Toronto's Globe and Mail had reported that the Canadian military had detected Chinese monitoring buoys in the Arctic. An expert on Arctic marine security says buoys were likely dropped by Chinese icebreakers and could be used to chart the seafloor in Canadian territory and perhaps even track American submarines. Earlier, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly referred to China as an increasingly disruptive power, adding that Ottawa will work with NORAD to protect North American airspace and take a strong position on Canada's Arctic sovereignty. For NPR News, I'm Dan Karpenchuk in Toronto.
The United Nations General Assembly is expected to vote today on a resolution. It calls for peace in Ukraine. The first anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine is tomorrow. The draft resolution at the UN calls for an immediate ceasefire. It also demands that Russia leave Ukraine. You're listening to NPR News.